muted. We're currently.
Yep.
I think you're currently muted, Andy.
Yeah, I think you just need to unmute so we can hear you.
Thanks, Blake.
Not a problem.
That's important. So hi, everyone. My name's Andy. I'm the general manager at LifeStart here at Timken World Headquarters. I'm really excited here to have Doctors Tim and Mike Pavlak here from Physio Orthopedics Performance. Two friends of mine built up a great physical therapy business pretty much from the ground up. This is their own show that they're running here. Very prominent in the Akron and the Canton area. So I'm excited to have them on and give us some good knowledge here, okay? So I will pass it along here to them. First of all, if you guys do have any questions, we have dedicated 10 to 15 minutes at the very end for any questions that you may have. If you do think of any during the presentation, you can put them down in the chat box, and then we'll make sure to get to those at the very end. So without further ado, Tim and Mike, take it away.
Thank you. And before you unmute yourself, Andy, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You can, as in head nod.
Yeah, you're good.
So it's kind of interesting. So like, I can't see anybody's screen. I know you're watching anything. I can see my brother holding the iPad. So really, this is kind of like an interesting demonstration here compared to like the normal in-person stuff we did before. My second question is, I wonder what point the practice needs to get to before I can reference this as world headquarters. So like obviously, yeah, no, you can laugh intermittently, just like to make me know my jokes are okay. Like obviously, there's only two of us, there's only location. So this is Pop's world headquarters for sure, but I don't need like certain building number or number of patients or anything like that, but I digress. Those are my best jokes, so I'll be for all you guys. So both myself and my brother, a little bit of who we are, we're both doctors of physical therapy, we run this practice full time. We'll talk about this kind of unique. And then we're adjunct at the University of Akron. We teach, we're the senior lecturers for the fundamentals of strength and conditioning. So that's kind of like our part-time job we do on the side. We met Andy in undergrad. I've known each other ever since, and so really appreciate having on today. I think to chat with you guys about running. In reality, our practice is kind of different. It's not like regular PT where I say, all right, guys, you got to come in 3 days a week, and I watch you do very specific exercises. We deal with athletes, and it's a big range of athletes. I have people who are new to running. I've had the pleasure to work with a guy who's won the bronze medalist championships. Two people who are going to the leadership medal. We have a guy who's a triple jump world record holder, or I think he's a Brazil record holder currently, so they're off the world record holder. We had the MCLA cross country champ in the clinic last year. So the big range of people, and in reality, when it comes down to it, whether you're a recreational runner, training for your first 5K, or you're going to the Olympics, the personalities are kind of similar. Usually, they're a little bit type A personality, and I fall into that category, so I can say that, you know. When it comes down to it, they're very compliant because they care about running. They're not going to stop. If anything, they're going to modify things, learn better warm up, cool down, add things to that equation that keeps them healthy. There's a painful statistic, unfortunately, that inside of running, there is a 85% chance of something slowing you down if you're running the entire year. You know, so people look at CrossFit, weightlifting, and have negative connotations, but running has that as well. But in reality, there's a big difference between fitness and wellness. You know, the fittest people in the world are always the healthiest. So there is a line to walk in terms of, did we do something like?
No, I just thought that it's hard for us to hear.
Oh.
Let me do this.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Making some changes.
Make some changes and we'll see, because we have two earbuds in right now. You can put both of them in? That could change.
Sure.
Let's try that. Hold on, guys. Sorry. I'll put them both in. Can someone, was there a comment that dropped down? Can someone comment again? Did I change anything in terms of hearing capacity? Yeah, Brian, is this any better for you? Sorry about that. It is better. Cool. All right. Sorry, guys. We were trying to split the headphones. We'll just go this way. And if anything, message Mike if anything like that happens. In terms of running, you have that high injury rate. And I think what people run into is there's an equation to stay healthy. And it's not just run high mileage, get fit, eat some pizza, take a nap. Maybe when you're in undergrad or high school, that could happen. But staying healthy is this equation now. So things like rest, things like warm up, things like cool down, things like your mobility all kind of matter. And so Mike and I see residual themes because we literally do the same thing. We don't just see everybody, we see runners. That's our specialty. So we see the same thing kind of pop up clinically all day long, at least put you in a category. We have some awareness of things you could be doing. And these may not be uber specific to you, but they are specific to running. So when you look at warm up and cool down, that's what I want to cover today. And we'll talk about maybe some strength training at the end, depending on time. So from a warm up standpoint, people think, why do I need to warm up? At some point, your body will warm up during running. Unfortunately, it could be at mile 2, which isn't helpful. Running, there should be specific muscles that activate in order in terms of like posterior chain, which you turn on first, hamstring second, then those low back muscles. If you're running and you get low back pain all the time, chances are your glutes aren't firing or your hamstrings are firing first, or some of that order is thrown off. So from a predictor of injury standpoint, there are 2 predictors of injury. One is a past injury. You can't have a time machine. Number 2 is basically an asymmetry. So symmetrical muscle firing patterns really do matter. So from a warm-up standpoint, it's not like get your heart rate high. These warm-ups that we talked about today are basically going through and turning on the muscles in the right sequence so that your brain doesn't have to figure it out 2 miles in when you've had a sloppy movement pattern for a bunch of repetitions. Because running injuries aren't traumatic, like getting hit by a linebacker. They're not a 10 out of 10. They're a 1 plus a 1 plus a 1 plus a 1. And finally, you're irritated because you've had this high repetitions of a poor movement pattern. So that's the idea behind the warm-up. So muscle awareness, asymmetrical movement patterns trying to be avoided. And then the last is tendon loading. And so this warm-up will kind of cover that. So when you look at muscle activation, it's not a bunch of reps and fatigue yourself out. Like when we give you strength training stuff inside of our, I don't say do all your strength training before you run, because then you run fatigued and then you irritate yourself. I also don't say do a bunch of stretches before you run, because there's nothing going on from a muscle activation standpoint. We're trying to cement that activation and that your brain has awareness of what the muscle should be doing, as opposed to you figuring out later. So this is kind of the order that I like, and we'll kind of reference 1, 2, 3, 6 things or so. And there's a couple categories that fall into those things. So the first one is turning on the glutes. So when glute activation done in an order, and this is almost done before you warm up traditionally, like by a jog or by any dynamic stuff you're doing. So this would be the first thing inside of your warm up. You would be on your back. Your heels will be very, very close to your glutes. When your heels are close to your glutes, it is going to activate that posterior chain to the glute first. So this should be something very, very tangible, as opposed to just bridging up and not thinking about muscle you're turning on. I want you to think about squeezing glutes as hard as you can, going to a bridge position, and then holding. Isometric should be held. Isometric is when the muscle is turning on, but you're going through and you're not moving. So I'm in this position, the muscle's turning on, but I'm not moving the joint. That's an isometric, and it cements that signal for your muscle what it should be doing. Either double leg or single leg. Either way, I'm not looking for fatigue. I'm looking for a burn. That's number 1. Held for 30 to 60 seconds for like 1 or 2 rounds. Number 2 is we're going to turn on lateral stability. Where lateral stability is really important is the glute max that you turn on first pushes you up a hill. Lateral stability is the out. Where this is important is like my IT band people. When I see someone with outside knee pain, usually when they're running, this glute med muscle, this outside hip muscle is failing and their hip is dropping repetitively, causing stress into the knee. So turning on the outside glute would be step number 2. So the way you would do that is, this is the only tool you need. You would need a band. You put it up and around your hips. You would go into sideline. You would do the same thing. You would squeeze the glute, turn on the muscle. Think about squeezing the glute. You'd abduct up. This is like a clamshell position, and you feel that muscle get tense. This is that glute medius or minimus. You'd hold for 30 to 60 seconds just to get a little burn to the muscle, not fatigue, just to have some awareness of what that muscle should be. That's step number 2. Step number 3, and you see we'll go from like bigger muscles to smaller muscles, is we'll move down to the hip flexors and quads. You're using band, but for this anterior chain activation, you're taking the band and you're dropping it down to a foot and ankle. So I'm looped around a foot and ankle. I go through, I'll switch sides over here. I squeeze quad to turn all of these knee extensor muscles to support me with downhill running. I do a straight leg raise to hold. I feel TFL, rectus femoris, iliacus, and psoas all kind of turn on all these hip flexor muscles. And I hold at parallel 30 to 60 seconds. A little burn to the quad, a little burn into the hip flexor, and I'm good for a round or 2. The last 2 steps, and you're seeing we're going from big core muscles to more extremity muscles. We move down to the hamstring. Hamstrings should turn on after the glute, so we're kind of progressing that way. When I'm doing a glute bridge, my feet are close to my hips. When I'm doing a hamstring bridge, I'm farther away. So what you're going to do is you're going to do toes up a little bit farther, my feet from my glutes, squeeze the glutes to turn them on. Think about pulling my heel to my butt. So I'm turning on the hamstring. So I squeeze the glute, pull my heels to my butt, my heel to my butt, bridge up. This is a hamstring bridge. So I'm not only turning the glute on, I'm turning the hamstring on as well. Isometrically, either double leg or stance, either is fine for me depending on your strength level. And you're holding for 30 to 60 seconds to now turn on the hamstrings. Are we getting any questions pop up? We're doing okay.
Just quick run through the glute versus hamstring bridge again.
Yeah, so the difference here is a glute bridge. My feet are close to my butt. This is more important than the hamstring bridge in terms of the order. Squeeze the glute bridge up. There's my glute bridge. Second in my order, or fourth on our list, I move my feet away. I go toes up. I squeeze the glutes, my heels to my butt, and I bridge up and hold, and that gives the hamstring activation pattern. So this extension pattern should be triphasic. First, then low. So we're really focusing on the glute squeeze before I jump and pull my feet toward hamstrings. So the order matters. It's just kind of like retraining your brain on what should be activating. And your last movement pattern. This one's a little bit different in that it is eccentric loading. All of my Achilles tendinopathy, Achilles tendonitis people, or post-tib people, people with pain on the inside shin splint people, or people with pain down here by their heel into where all these calf muscles attach, would benefit from this exercise too. It is eccentric, so it's more fatiguing. So we're going low reps. So 3 movement patterns to turn on the gastroc, the upper bulk, the soleus, the lower bulk, and then this all post-tib or deep toe flexor area along the shin that people get shin splints. So in this position, you would go up on 2, shift to one leg, my knee is straight, and you do a negative, which is a slow lowering of 3, 2, 1. Up on 2, shift to 1, 3, 2, 1. 3 reps. That's all I want. 3 reps of that position. Position is focused on the soleus, the lower part of the muscle through here. Up on 2, I bend my knee. I shift to single leg. 3, 2, 1. You'll feel it way more into soleus. And again, 3 reps for that. My last one, face you a little bit here. We're gonna go toe in, up on 2, shift to one leg. My weight's on my big toe. 3, 2, 1. That negative loads all of these tendons through here, wards off tendinopathy into the post-tibial area, and also loads all of these muscles in this medial shin. That can make a huge difference in your warm-up. So basically, going through and kind of in summary, is turning on these muscles in the right order is a big deal in terms of loading the joint, loading the tissue, and establishing that brain connection pattern. So glute isometrics, clamshell isometrics to load the lateral hip, straight leg raise to load the quads and the hip flexors, hamstrings to load the hamstrings at the end, and then this 3-way calf negative to load the gastroc, the soleus, and the post-tib area are all things. And I know like it's a lot of information, but I'm kind of giving you everything. We're just kind of big picturing it, you know. And from a rehab standpoint, this isn't appropriate for every single person, but from a healthy person standpoint, if you have some time on your hands, you have the ability to do a proper warm-up before a race or before a high quality workout, you know, compared to just like an easy run. These are things that would make sense to do before you go out and jog, you know. And in reality, the explanation may take a while, but you going through and doing it shouldn't really take that long. So that's kind of like the big difference maker that we're looking for. Is there anything I missed? Thanks to you. Okay. So when we transition here, Mike's going to take you through some of like the post-run stuff you should be doing, and he'll give you a good explanation of what the post-run should look like, because everything is either sympathetic nervous system or parasympathetic. When you're running, you're in the sympathetic nervous system. When all that blood flow is going from your central to your arms and to your legs, it's like fighter, the muscles are turning on and propelling your body forward. And that's where people like your hands warm up as you run because that blood flow is going to your extremities. If you don't go through and down regulate everything with this cool down that Dr. Mike's going to talk about, then that's where it's basically like leaving your car running the whole day. So he'll go through and kind of is there. So we'll do a seamless transition. We do. Perfect. I'll say it is weird because I feel like I know we're really funny, but the fact that everyone's muted, we can't hear them laugh. I think that's probably the only limiting factor to all of this. So if you want to continue laughing in the background for me, that would be much appreciated. So I think one thing to kind of key in on what Dr. Tim was talking about is what we're giving you is not
strength training. This is simply activation. So these are not things that Tim gave you at the beginning that you do and you think, I'm going to build muscle mass, I'm going to build strength, I'm going to increase my 1 rep of me weightlifting. These are the idea of, these are the muscles that are most appropriate and most important while we're running. We just want them to turn on. There's a reason bicep curl wasn't in that, because that's not an important running muscle. We're just turning on the right things. The same stuff occurs when we talk about this post-run education or this post-run mobility work we're going to do. Its goal again is we're not trying to increase tissue flexibility. So I won't be giving you any stretches. And that's not because I don't think stretches are appropriate or important. I'm just saying our goal is to take the muscle that has been turned on and it's working hard and say, okay, now it's time to settle down. It's time to go into that resting position. So our down regulation is going to be more focused on mobility work, which will come through if you've ever used foam roller or a ball or a stick roller. I'll kind of demo some of those for you today. Those will be our main focuses from that standpoint. Stretching is incredibly appropriate still and actually should be done at the end of a workout anyways, because that's when tissue is flexible and pliable and it can be stretched. But that's not what we'll be getting into today. So when I talk about mobility work, I think the biggest thing you want to key in on is this idea of slow, deep pressure. It's the idea of working the lacrosse ball or the stick roller, or the foam roller into the muscle belly, because this actually ramps up what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. If you've ever heard anyone refer to the idea of fight or flight or rest and digest, the parasympathetic is it's the part of your nervous system that tells you, hey, it's time to settle down. It's time to, like when you eat a big meal and you get tired, it's ramping up the idea of, okay, I don't need to go fight or run or play football after my Thanksgiving dinner. I need to sit down and I need to just digest everything. I need to let this area recover. So that's what we're looking at when we start bringing in those activities. I'm just going to grab the work. You need a little bit more for the post-run equipment. I'd say all in all, your buy-in might be close to $10. If you live close enough to a university or a high school, I'm sure you could wander around the track and find a lacrosse ball. I don't endorse that, but I threw it out there if you wanted to think about it from that standpoint. And then a stick roller is what you can look it up for. You can find it on Amazon for like $10 to $15. I'm sure if you find a gold-plated one, it could be more expensive than that, but the little plastic guy will work out just perfectly for you. If you are really efficient and don't want to buy this, rolling pin. You kitchen, but whoever's doing the majority of the cooking in your house, make sure you double check with them first, because that could get you in trouble, because I'm sure they don't want your sweaty calves on their rolling pin. So again, it's an option, but if I get emails telling people saying that like, Dr. Mike said this is okay, I will vehemently deny it, except I just remembered Andy's recording all this. So I'm kind of tied on that one. So let's talk a little bit about post-run stuff. We'll talk through stick first. There's going to be 3 muscles we'll look at that are appropriate to use for the stick roller. And then there will be 3 muscles, and I'll probably throw 1 more in there. We'll make it 4 that'll be appropriate for the lacrosse ball. So starting with that stick roller, let's just set that down. Starting with the stick roller, we're going to run through a couple of these muscles. What's important to notice here is while the activation stuff, Tim gave you a specific order that's really important to do. The order in this is going to be not as important. So you don't need to follow hip flexors to quads to calves, but it'll be important to knock all of those things out. So we'll actually start with those hip flexors first. You're going to use a stick roller for that. Probably the best position you can to use the stick roller is actually just a sitting position. And that's because it puts the hip flexor on a little bit of stretch. If you are to be up completely standing, that hip flexor is now completely stretched out. In which case, I'm sorry, I said it's going to be completely stretched out, which is going to make it hard to dig in deep to the muscle. In a sitting position, you put that muscle in slack, which lets you dig a little bit deeper into it. The best thing you can do is you have a hip bone right here called the ASIS. You want to locate that bone. It's right, kind of right on your belt line, basically. You can take 1 step down from that area, and that's going to get into your hip flexor. So all you're going to do with that stick roller is drop it into that hip flexor. And you're just going to drop a little pressure through there. You can even get out a little bit more lateral to dig in there as well. With all of the stick rolling, is an appropriate spot to be there. Now, what you'll notice is you can kind of make a seamless transition from being, in the hip flexor to moving down into the quad. There's actually a muscle that runs from that AS ASIS all the way down to the quad. That's called the rectus femoris, and it doubles as a hip flexor and a quad muscle as well. So if you're working out of there, you can actually work right into what would be called the rectus femoris, which is going to be right through this muscle. There are really two other quad muscles that you're going to want to work on. One's going to be called vastus, which just means it's a quad muscle that's on the inside of the quad. In which case you can find there's a little horseshoe muscle that kind of sits right through here. That's where you're going to start, and you're just going to roll through that guy as well. And then the last muscle in the quad is actually on the outside. It's called the vastus lateralis, and it's going to be on this side. Now, what's always interesting is people are like, well, should I roll through my IT band? And the short answer is really no, there's not a huge benefit to it. In fact, there's a very interesting study that says where they were trying to stretch the IT band. So what they did was they took the body of a Volkswagen Beetle, and they took a cadaver, so a deceased individual's IT band, and they hooked on a meat hook the IT band to the car, and they let it hang there for 3 days. And they came back 3 days later to see how much extensibility that IT band had stretched, and there's actually none. So what that's telling us is the IT band itself is a very rich structure. It's not going to stretch. It's not going to mobilize. So you're not doing yourself much of a favor by working through this area. You want to be up just a little bit higher and work through that vastus lateralis. It's a muscle that attaches to the IT band and thus can be stretched and can be mobilized. So if you think the top of your quad is north and the IT band is east, you want to be about northeast. And you want to spend, again, 30 seconds right through there. After that, you can move down into the quads. There are really two important muscles you want to hit. The top part of the muscle is called the gastroc, and the bottom, oh, calf. My apologies. The top part of the muscle is called the gastroc, and the bottom part of the muscle is called the soleus. Similar concept here. The idea of stick rolling through this area is a little bit tough unless you put the muscle on slack. So the best thing you can do to put this calf on slack is bend at the knee and then bend at the ankle. So you can kind of tuck it in just like that. A little bit of an awkward position for how I'm sitting so you guys can see everything. But if you're sitting in a chair, it's a little bit easier to do. So with the knee and the calf bent, you can take that stick roller and you can start on the outside of the calf, spend about 30 seconds through there, and then you can get around into that inside as well, which is going to look like inherently the exact same thing just on the inside of the muscle. Big things to pay attention to when you are using the stick roller. There's a couple bony prominences that you could potentially roll over. In the calf, there's a bone right here called the head. You'll notice that when you push on it, it doesn't feel like a muscle. It's not soft or squishy. It's hard. You don't want to roll on bones. All you're going to do is inflame an area. So if you are hitting something that feels really solid, it's probably not a knot. It's probably actually a bone. So stay away from a bone when you're using the lacrosse ball or the stick roller. So that's kind of everything from the stick roller perspective. I'm going to grab the lacrosse ball really quickly, and we'll kind of talk you through 3 more muscle groups. And the lacrosse ball is going to be really helpful in working through the posterior chain or those muscles in the back. And in fact, that's where we'll start. If we're talking about the low back, the best way to get it, you're going to lie on your back with your knees bent. Just for viewing, you're going to roll to your side, and you can find where a little bony prominence is in the back. That's called the spinous process. Start the ball actually right on the bone, but then roll off into the muscle belly. So if this is where the bone is, you're going to roll off till you fall off into the muscle belly. And then all you're going to do is lie on top of the ball. Now, a giant cushy table, massage table, is probably not an ideal location to be lying on this. A more solid surface like the floor, well, just probably not your bed. Anything that's a little bit more solid would be appropriate. But once you're lying on top of that lacrosse ball, all you're going to do is a breathing pattern to help you sink into it, where you'll take a deep breath in, you'll let it out. And as you're letting it out, turn those abs on, contract, and that'll push you down, and you'll feel the lacrosse ball pushing up into you. And it's going to be a deep pressure. Think back to what we said at the beginning. This deep pressure tells muscles to relax. From a rep range, 5 to 6 reps is appropriate. And you're actually going to go 4 spots in the back. So you can start in the low back, just roll up a pinch, hit that higher portion of the low back, roll across the bone into the other muscle belly, and then you can roll back down. All of what we've spoken about so far, anything we talk about with the lacrosse ball, is all going to be 5 to 6 reps as well. So that's for the low back. The next one we're going to move into will be the glute, which you're going to maintain that same lying position. Again, take that ball, and this time instead of being in the back, you're going to put it into the hip musculature. Once you find that, drop it down. And what you're actually going to do is you're going to look for a tight or a tender spot. When you find that tight or tender spot when you're rolling around, that's going to be where you want to work. with the pressure into the glute, you're just going to take your knee and you're actually just going to let it drop off the edge and come back up. And you're going to cycle through internal and external rotation of the hip. You should feel the ball underneath the glute kind of mobilizing as that tissue flexes and extends. And you're going to cycle through there 5 or 6 reps. You can look for 2 to 3 different spots. That's not a problem, but do both sides bilaterally. Important to key in here as well that mobility work is good. Too much mobility work is bad. And what that means is if you are doing the stuff with the lacrosse ball and the stick roller and you get off of those instruments and you feel worse, it probably means you're doing a little bit too much. So the dosage is low for a reason, because we're just trying to do muscles to settle down. We're not trying to do so much that we effectively bruise the area. So that's from that standpoint. The last one we're going to talk about is going to be for the hamstring. And the way the hamstring one's going to work is you're going to be in this seated position. You're going to take that ball and you're going to put it underneath into the hamstring where it is. The same thing. You can kind of fish around and try to find a tight or a tender spot. Once you find that spot, you can drop your body weight into it. You can increase the amount of pressure you're going to feel by leaning forward, or you can decrease it by leaning backwards. But find something that feels, I'm going to use the term comfortable, but I'll put it in air quotes. Comfortable meaning, and this is the same with all the lacrosse ball techniques, meaning it's not enough that you're sitting in pain or have to bite the inside of your cheek, but it's enough that you're not going to fall asleep while you're doing it. It's one of those, I don't like to use the term, but it makes sense here, that hurts so good type feeling where I know I'm doing some appropriate work here. So once you find that tight or tender spot, just take your leg, you're going to kick it out straight, and you're going to drop it back down, and you're going to cycle through that motion, working into that tight or tender spot of where you place that lacrosse ball. That'll be everything from that standpoint. Just because I know it's sometimes a little tricky to get to the calves, you can do a little bit of a hack and throw the lacrosse ball into the calf as well. You'll come into, absolutely. Tim will address the stretching question after this. What you're going to do with that lacrosse ball is you're going to put it into the calf, and you're going to look around and find a tighter spot. Once you find that spot, you can pin your body weight into it to hold it there and just flex and extend to the ankle. That'll let you dig a little bit deeper. So that mobility stuff. Do you want to trade off? So let's do seamless transition. Let's set that right there.
I think I'm back.
Yep.
Okay. Blake asked a question, and I know we had said answer stuff at the end, but I think it fits really, really well here. And I think it was in relation to like prior to the activation stuff, are there some easy stretches I should be doing? It's kind of an interesting question, and it's kind of tough to say. So most people who have an office job will feel stiff after their office job is over into their glutes, low back, and hamstrings. The body's really interesting in that you could go through and you could stretch your face, but it won't take away that stiffness. The activation exercises are going to take away any chain stiffness. So if you feel tight into your glutes or into your hamstrings, glutes and hamstrings, then it probably is coming from a lack of activation and will fade as you go through and do the activation stuff that I talked about early on. Now, there's a caveat to that. If we are in this position for however many hours a day, you guys are all hard workers at Timken, so 8 hours a day, just sitting here, no office breaks, no coffee, just going to town on the computer if that's something you work at station-wise, and we're in this not great posture position, everything is getting shorter into the anterior chain. Your hip flexors are getting tight, your pecs getting tight, everything in that area is getting tight, everything back here is actually getting lax because you're sitting on it, it's not doing its job, and it's being overstretched. So if you feel stiffness in the posterior chain, I'm not worried about it, do the activation stuff. Stiffness comes from, it's almost your body creating false stability. As you get true stability of the muscles turning on, the false stability of stiffness will go away by itself. But the caveat is, if you are feeling stiff into your hip flexors and pec, and you feel like you're quasi-motored over, after work all day before you run, it could be appropriate to do some stretching beforehand. The stretching could come in after your more dynamic warm-up. So you do the activation stuff, posterior chain's feeling pretty good. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna jog at 800, I'm gonna stretch a little bit. Research says you don't want to overstretch, but you could do some anterior chain stretching. And answer to your question, there are 3 things that I would do to statically stretch after you run a little bit tissue, increase tissue blood flow, increase tissue extensibility. The stretch matters a little bit more. Those 3 things I would do would be a hip flexor stretch. You're in this position. My down leg is like I'm stretching. I take my hips and I shift my hips forward. I pelvic move forward, I tip my hips backwards. I put my head raised to the sky and I lean forward to some degree. So in this position, you'll feel a hip flexor stretch. Now here's the thing, if you don't move your hips and you just lean forward, I can go all the way through here. If I move my hips forward, I lock my pelvis in place, I reach up and stretch my psoas and I lean forward. I have a huge stretch through here that would open up that anterior chain. That would be stretch number one that I care about. Yeah, so pelvic tilt backwards, lock my hips in place, lean forward, reach to the sky with that same arm of the leg that I'm stretching. And then you can even lean a little bit to really pull into the psoas and hip flexor. That would be great for after work, after you're a little warmed up. Not like a dead cold stretch, but like run 400 meters, do a little stretching type of thing, pretty easy. Number two would still be a hip flexor stretch, but you'd be on your back and you go into this position. This is for the TFL. TFL is stretched by going into this, I'll go here, figure four position. I go up, to put 90 degrees in hip flexion, I rotate away. So I go figure four, hip flexion, rotate away from the hip I'm stretching, big stretch on the outside hip. Shouldn't be, just should be a stretch. That is number two. Stretches should be held for 18 seconds to make a permanent change. So most people are fast counters, let's count to 30, you know. The last one is kind of full anterior chain. You go on your stomach, completely flat here. I inhale, I exhale, drop my stomach to the ground. I look to the ceiling with my neck. I extend up to the low back. I keep my hip flexors on the ground. And I hold this position for 18 to 30 seconds and relax down. Inhale, exhale, stomach falls to the ground, look to the sky, extend up. And what you've effectively done is you've gone through and you've chipped away at all of that anterior chain tension from work, basically, from being in this posture, working hard, you know, for Timken, where everything's kind of gotten tight through there. So that would be the goal of, if there is any stretching, Blake, I think it was Blake who answered that question, that would make a lot of sense to me. If you're going to add in something, that would be the stretch I would add in. It's kind of interesting. If you look at research, like we're talking chiropractic, MD, PT, BO, all research, there are actually no studies inside of that rehab world that show that stretching prevents any sort of injury. There is a lot of research that says that activation, warming up, strength training prevents injury. So really, we can't find a reason to stretch unless you are lacking range of motion because you've been sitting in a position for a long time, all day. So those would be something that would kind of make sense to me for a reason to stretch. I'm not anti-stretching, but this is how I would justify in a desk worker case, if you're working at a desk, that it would make sense. I think Mike is going to talk about strength training a little bit. So we can come back to the stretching if there's some follow-up questions at the end. Okay, you're welcome, Blake. Got your back. I'll rotate with Mike here again. There's our battery.
Perfect. Okay, so we kind of went through activation, relaxation, or mobility, and then Tim discussed flexibility. Those are really kind of, you think, the three big things that are going to happen within the muscular world. It's either getting stronger, it's moving better, or it's increasing tissue length. And that's one of the three things we've covered, with the addition of stretching being that flexibility or tissue length. So just in summary, warm up's really important because it brings blood flow to the area, which causes muscles to be more supple. If you've ever heard of a friend or someone who's ruptured or torn a muscle, it's typically in that very start of their training when the tissue's not warm and they try to sprint up a hill. They jump right into some plyometric exercise and the Achilles ruptures. This is why tissue suppleness is so important. And then from a cool down perspective, our big idea is we want to take that muscle that is ramped up and ready to be active, and we want it to now say, okay, turn that car off and let the engine settle down. You don't get home from work, leave the keys in your car, let the engine keep running and go to bed, and then get up in the morning so that the engine's warm so you can start leaving. It only takes a couple of minutes for the engine to turn on, but you got to let that engine cool down. Otherwise it's burning too hot. That's where you see engine problems occur. So that's warm up and cool down. We are going to discuss real quickly just a little bit of strength training. This goes a little bit different from what we talked about activation. Activation was the idea of we're just getting blood flow to the area. Strength training is actually, we're looking for hypertrophy of the muscle. We're looking to actually build a little bit of muscle mass, muscle strength. And these are, again, another thing that are very helpful in preventing injuries down the road. These are not things you need to do every single day, though. If you're getting to them 2, 3, 4 times a week, just to supplement into your weight training, maybe you're Timken, you're back at full time in Timken. You guys are actually able to go into their beautiful facility and work out. You're in there 3 days a week. This is the appropriate time to bring these in. And what we're going to give you is 3 exercises that are really specific to runners. The reason they're specific to runners is because they are they're single leg movements. Think anytime you run, you have one leg hitting the ground, you need to stabilize at that point. So we really like the single leg movement, and they're posterior chain focused, which like Tim spoke about was glute, hamstring, calf, and that low back all working together to propel you forward. So the first one we're going to do is called a 4-way monster walk. It's just going to bring that band back, and we'll actually switch from this position. Bring that band back. You're going to step through, and I just want it over top of the knees. You will drop into a mini squat position. You should feel that the band is trying to pull your knees inward. Don't let that occur. Fight and drive those knees out. That'll help activate the glutes to start. From that kneeling or that squatting position, you're just going to do a stepping pattern where you'll take 20 steps in one direction, 20 steps in the other direction to warm up the lateral parts of the hip. You're going to activate that anterior and posterior part as well. By still being in that mini position, you're going to step out and then bring the legs together, out, bring the legs together, 20 in that direction, and you can take it backwards as well, back together, back together. Notice I'm not just marching forward and marching backwards. There's a little bit of a serpentine movement. That's because we're trying to activate these lateral portions of the muscles as well. So 4-way monster walk is the first one we'll look at. The second one is called a standing fire hydrant. So you keep the band exactly where it is. I'm going to grab the wall just for a balance sake. But in this standing position, you can drop into that mini squat again. The stance leg, which for me will be the right leg, you're going to take that knee and you're going to drive it out. So if I look down, I should be able to see all of my toes on the inside of my knee. That's how you know you're in a good position with that stance leg. So that stance leg saying firmly planted, the other leg will come lifted off and it'll float right off the floor. From that position, you're going to kick the hip back diagonally. Important to recognize, I'm not going sideways, I'm not going backwards, I'm actually cutting the middle of those two, and I'm kicking out diagonally. Everything you should feel working is right here in the glute. 15 to 20 reps is appropriate in this location as well. That's called the standing fire hydrant. You're going to do it on both sides, because what you'll notice is when you're standing, the stance leg will activate the front part of that hip. The floating leg or the moving leg will activate the back part. So then when you switch, you're going to work on both of the other ones as well. The last movement you're going to do is called a steamboat, which at that point, people probably think our profession is made up. Where we're doing fire hydrants and monster walks and pretty ridiculous sounding activities, but I guess we aim to at least entertain a little bit as well. So in this standing position, the band has moved down to your ankles. So you're going to kick out in 3 directions. Just something for balance there. You just want to take the leg and you want to explode out and control coming back as well. So you're not just flopping the leg all around to kick. You control out, control back, control out, control back. That's you kicking forward. You'll next kick out laterally, out, control back, kick out, control back. And then lastly, you're going to kick back, control, kick back, control. 10 to 15 reps in all 3 of those directions is also appropriate. Those are probably good single running related strength training activities you can do. Like I said, not to be done every single day, because actually I'm working a little bit more on hypertrophy. You can increase your resistance by getting a thicker band, maybe using some sort of cable machine if you can hook it to your ankle appropriately, but something that's going to let you have more resistance is going to provide more strengthening. It's just always good to start low and work your way up to kind of figure out what that muscle tolerance would be. So that's kind of strength training in a nutshell, just a couple quick things. I think from that standpoint, that's kind of everything Tim and I wanted to cover. Questions that have been showed up? Yeah, you can. Oh, I can do that for you. So flip it like you were.
Okay.
There you go. And then let's turn off Bluetooth. Oh,
Cool.
there you go.
All right.
So, Andy, if you want to pop back in and direct, if there are questions, Tim and I are more than willing to answer them. If there are not questions,
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, if anyone
we'll
does
hit
have
the
any
big
questions.
ones.
Sorry, go ahead.
So we'll hit the big ones to start. Tim and I are brothers. He is older. I am more handsome. I think those are usually the big three questions.
Usually, if you want to know how much taller I am, I'm I don't know, 2
Nah,
inches.
you're like 2 inches.
2 inches. I have 3 brothers, and Mike's my only brother under 6 foot tall. We made him sit in the back of the van. When we got my parents. Here we go. Any chance to get a hand out these items?
Oh yeah, for sure. That'd be easy. We'll
Okay.
just generate it. We'll send it off. I'll email it over to Andy, just with the quick names of them. And that shouldn't be a problem at all. We can absolutely send that
We have
over.
a YouTube channel too. We can attach the link to our YouTube channel as well. And then I think Andy recorded all this, correct, Andy?
Yep, everything's recorded, and I'll put that on our YouTube page as well, and then it'll be available on the Temkin Benefits website as well. So everyone that is an associate at Temkin, across the country, will be able to watch us. So I think that's pretty awesome as well.
I think I got a question here. Here, hold on, Mike.
Yeah, and then in terms of that list, too, of everything that was discussed today, if you just send it over to me, and then I'll make sure I email that out to everyone that was in attendance today.
Okay, for sure. How long should was it pre-warm up?
I think it was everything in whole. Hold on, we'll pull it up again.
Sorry, chat. How long should the entire pre-warm up take? So I do realize that not everyone has a limited time. I personally had not become sponsored by Nike yet. I'm not sure if any of you guys have.
I turned down mine.
Yeah, right. Email's really slow these days, so that could be a problem with our contracts. But I realize that these things take some time to do. I would say I gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, like 6 things to roll through to some degree. 2 sets each, about a minute. I bet the warm up takes you 10 minutes, and that is when you know what you're doing. If you were to watch the video, like if I just went through and I warmed up, it would probably take me 10 minutes because I invented what I'm talking about today, or at least decided I was there. But here we go. This is good. Darn. Yep. So I appreciate the kindness too. Yep. So when you get that sponsorship, I will have much higher expectations for you. But until that time comes, I would say 10 minutes for the activation stuff. If you cared about the stretching, I would say, run a 400, run an 800, something. But somewhere around time moving to do this, it's the static stretches are 18 to 30 seconds. You're hitting them around each minute's another 6 minutes, 15, somewhere around that. Yep. Tommy Joe, respect for sure. Blake, way to give him props even though you're not sponsored. We appreciate it. You're welcome. Any other questions? Like I said, we really do the same thing all day, every single day. So lots of things in Mike's head that make sense to us that we may went over into sound kind of like, why am I doing, muscle work warm up as opposed to stretching beforehand or anything like that? Like there's definitely things that come out of my mouth that I think this is really great. And then people come back and say, I have no idea what you're referencing. So if you guys have any of those moments, fire away. And Andy, we can even maybe when you do the document too.
What's that?
If anybody doesn't want to speak up but has questions, we can give our emails out too. When we send you over that document, that works for us, and you can fire a question when you are really watching the lecture again tonight before you go to bed, and you really want to just throw all the information. You can fire an email that way too.
Definitely. No, I think, it's definitely super helpful, especially for me. Even I'm guilty of, either not warming up at all or cooling down at all. But what I took is like a pre-run warm up was maybe some leg swings. So if anything, so I think that was really helpful. And what you guys described too, I do, have some lower back tightness. So I'm looking forward to implementing these in my running personally as well. So I think that should definitely help me out a lot.
It is kind of crazy when it comes down to it, when you start talking about like low back pain, a lot of times come from other posterior chain muscles not doing their job. Like when I go through just like clinically and I push around into tight muscles and I find like the upper back is really tight on the left side, almost every single time there's glute weakness too, because the glute for however many years has been under firing, It'd be an interesting test, but if you go through and you were to like do a toe touch and have someone look at your like mid back area, and if one side's look higher than the other, then there's some muscle hypertrophy. Test the bridge on that leg compared to the other leg. I could probably guarantee if you have a raised part of your back and it's not coming from like a scoliosis or anything, but just from that muscle hypertrophy over time, you'll probably find some glute weakness on the same side that's been there for a long time. So it is very tangible what you see clinically in terms of the glutes leading to low back pain or back stiffness or anything like that from a running standpoint.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I think especially, where was I going with this? in terms of like just feeling overall tightness and stuff too. People stretch, and they still feel tight. I think what you guys said about the activation is really important for people to know, just because that's just a generalized thought that, you know, the more I stretch, the more loose I'm going to be, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. Yep, I can.
We got
part of that.
Yeah, we got another question here.
Yeah, about the
Coming-
knees over toes, guys.
Hold on, let me make this official. Look, coming all the way from Dane out of probably California, long time listener, first time caller. Dane has the question. Hold on, I should have read the question too. I really built it up there, and I forgot to read the question. Hold on.
It's chat.
Thanks, Mike. This is why I hired you. Are you familiar with the knees over toes guy? If so, what are your thoughts on training his philosophy as PTs? Haha, which is an abbreviation for laughing.
Good question, Dane. This is kind of cool. I was talking with a client of ours just last week who actually just started implementing his program into some of his stuff. And I think it's cool because when you think the original thought process, I don't know about if any of you guys were college or high school athletes, but I know growing up I swam in high school, I swam in college. And when we were in the weight room, I had coaches who notoriously would yell at me every time my knees did go over my toes, because there's a lot of old research, and it's research from incredible Russian weightlifters. Are we going to weigh in on something here?
Yeah, are you referencing running or lifting?
Running
or squatting? I'm assuming you're really referencing running compared to
the knees over toes guys. So it's more of a weight training.
I know. There's two knee over toes guys.
Oh,
Mike's referencing.
I'm more of a weight training guy.
Dane, are you referencing?
I only know of the one. I don't know his real name. He's kind of taller and lean. I feel he's more of a running guy.
Okay.
That's a fair question then.
Okay.
I was going a very different direction.
You are,
weight
which
training.
is highly accurate. We're going a different way. So I am, and there are two people who go along with that. One is his name Nikolai Romanov, and he's Russian, and he's a big like barefoot running guy, and expert in that field, and he does a lot with that. And the other is the guy who was with CrossFit, did CrossFit Endurance for a long time, and he does power speed endurance now. I can't remember his name for the life of me. It's Brian something. Mike, why don't you go look at our bookshelf for a second? Look for Unbreakable Runner and see what his name is. But he references that, and it's with running specifically. And the idea is maybe in 2011, there was a big push for like barefoot running, and barefoot running is better for you, decrease injury risk and everything like that. And they've done a lot of research studies into barefoot running. What is his name?
TJ Murphy and
Brian McKenzie. Brian McKenzie's a big knees over toes guy. And where the research came out is you would switch to a low drop shoe, a minimalist shoe, a barefoot type shoe, and they found it didn't change your injury rate at all. But what they did find is your tibia angle matters. So Mike, why don't you record my tibia for a second?
Yep.
So I'm referencing, hopefully you guys can hear this to some degree. So if I'm keeping my nose over my toes when I'm running the whole time, then what's happening is my tibia is always staying upright. If at any point my toes come out here, my nose is not over my toes anymore, I've achieved this angle at the joint that's not
knees or nose.
Nose, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, my bad. Nose. It's not over that area. My knees are not over my toes as well. Either way, it's going to be the same thing off the chain. What you're doing is you're putting a lot more force into all the tibia through up into your femur, up into your knee, and up into your hip as well. And so the school of thought is you're decreasing what are called like ground reaction forces. You can switch back here, Mike. So where that school of thought comes from is they looked at like minimalist shoes and like the changes you would have with minimalist shoes, and they're seeing nothing. But they found when you change the joint angle, you really decrease the ground reaction force, the force going into the bone and into the above structures. And running in general is actually 6 times your body weight. Is that right, Mike? Mm-hmm. Yeah, single leg stance. And if your tibia goes from upright to here and you change that joint angle, those ground reaction forces skyrocket. You can pass 6 times your body weight, which causes a lot of long-term injuries. So the idea of keeping everything over your toes and not biasing forward or backwards, anything like that, really does decrease your injury risk. And it's not like the minimalist shoe. It's really just like either shortening your stride or making sure that you're almost like continually falling forward as opposed to your legs shooting out and going past your center of mass or your center of gravity, your knees or your nose or anything like that.
So an easy way to like, if your goal is to kind of follow to that prescribed, I want to keep my, legs or my feet like closer to my body. The biggest thing you can change for you is your cadence. We see that a normal cadence is considered 170 steps per minute. So if you want to, just count how many times your right foot strikes the ground in 30 seconds and multiply it by 4. That's going to give you your cadence. A higher cadence is going to give you a shorter stride, which is going to subscribe more to that knees, the reference you were making with the knees over toes. So if you want to be more close to like 180 steps per minute, that's going to let you do that. So
Yeah, and most Garmin watches, like Forerunners, do that. And I would think a lot of Apple watches probably do that too. There's be a statistic called cadence, and you're looking for what, 180?
180 or higher is probably where you want to be if you want to keep that really tiny cadence, which would be a really quick cadence, which would be a small stride, which would subscribe to that idea.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you're someone who has pain with your low back or your knees or your hip after running. I bet your cadence is more like sub 160 because you're just loading all the structures up higher. So changing that cadence and shortening your stride a little bit can make a big difference in your loading pattern. There's another question in there too. Hopefully that's pretty long-winded, but that's kind of what I'm looking
It's
for.
everything you wanted to know and what you didn't want to know.
Yeah.
Are there any on-the-go activation things you can do before a race? And that was from Alex Campbell, also a longtime listener, first time follower.
I believe so. I heard the name before. What is it? It's before a race.
Before a race. So probably looking more along the idea of like bare minimum warm up. I'm trying to give all my all. I don't want to lose any amount of muscular endurance or fatigue anything out. What can I do?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
I think, the big one for there is I like, for me, I know those things that Tim listed through. I kind of know my, Achilles heel, my weakness, where my injuries typically show up. I know I am typically, if I put myself in a bad position, I'm injuring right around my shins. So in my warm up before I start competing and doing high exertion is I actually spend more of my time doing the ankle related warm ups. So those negatives are really important for me because I know that's my weak spot. So if I'm trying to save energy because I know I'm about to give everything I got for a race or a competition, I'm going more to my problems and I'm going to warm up there. That's just a quick thought. Hey, it lets you kind of take the information we've already looked at and apply it specifically to you and what your typical struggle is. Do you have an add-on to that?
Yeah, and that's good because you have awareness of where your weaknesses and where your deficits are. If I was just going big picture, I would do the glute stuff. I would do all the central stuff, the glute bridging, power, stability, explosiveness comes from your glutes. Like power doesn't come from the shoulder, power comes from your scapula and all the bracing sequence. Power doesn't come from your quads and your hamstrings, power comes from your glutes and your hip flexors. So I would do the activation stuff for the glutes and the hip flexors. If I have all right, I just got to the race, I got stuck in traffic, got a couple minutes, I would do the glute stuff first. Doesn't really require a lot. I know the banded clamshells, but you could replace the banded clamshell with like a side plank hold, and those are, I guess, still activation things, 30-second hold, then do your warm up. Those would be the ones I do to fire up the muscle. So that's kind of helpful. Anything else, guys? You're welcome.
Super helpful.
I did have a question from someone that wasn't able to be in attendance tonight. And I know this is kind of a pretty generalized question. You probably wouldn't be able to fully answer it, obviously, without seeing this person in person. But they are experiencing knee and ankle stiffness after running for about a day or more. All they told me is they had multiple ankle injuries in the past. Is there any tricks or tips to help with stiffness in the ankles or knees after a run?
So you said knee and ankle? That's kind of a tough question because there's actually a lot of answers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Shoe choice matters.
That's what I was going to go with.
Shoe choice doesn't matter. If you're getting a lot of lower extremity stuff, you can look at different shoes that have different drops on them. The drop is basically from the front of your foot to the back of your foot, how elevated it is. And it's a big range. There are shoes called Ultra, ALTRA, and it's like a 0 drop. There are like the classic Nike Pegasus Brooks Ghost and more like a 10 millimeter drop, which means that heel's more elevated. I would have them look at the drop of their shoe. I would have them take that shoe into a running store and see if they get a higher drop. And this is just like
very general.
Very general. I don't know anything orthopedically about them, so this is something they could maybe change to
without
change
having
their
to go
symptoms.
see a clinician.
Yeah,
I'll tell him to come see you.
Yeah,
He's local. I'll tell him to pop on over.
Yeah, but just in general, maybe changing the drop of your shoe, because if you upregulate the drop a little bit, you'll load your hips more. And if you downregulate, you load your ankles and your knees a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one thing that if I was just like answering like this, just like a
someone
question
asked
that
a
I
question
don't
on
really,
Instagram,
something like that. That could be something that would make sense. But again, if you have pain, and I need to say this, you should talk to your provider, right? You
Yes.
should just like, well, these guys randomly never saw me or talked to me until they put a new shoe. I would go get fitted. I talk to a PT, a chiro, an MD if they
Someone
have
running,
running, and I would get that answer from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty specific question, kind of tough to say, but
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of shoes, what are your guys' favorite running shoes for, the casual runner, jogger? Do you have any specific brands or types?
Yeah, so you can do it this way, and I could say like, hey, this shoe may work for 40% of people, and I'm missing 60% of people, unfortunately, because there are 3 things that go into a shoe, and Mike does a lot of this, and correct me too. There is the neutral or stability. So a neutral shoe doesn't really prop up your arch. A stability shoe makes sure you don't overpronate. If you have a lot of shin pain, you want more of stability. Like inside shin pain, you want more of a stability shoe, so that matters. If you have like ankle, Achilles problems, you want to increase the drop and be a drop more like 8 to 10 millimeters. If you have low back and hip pain, you want to lower the drop, be closer to that 4 millimeter, 5, 6 millimeter. And then if you're someone who you have a lot of upper body, like glutes and low back pain, you probably want a shoe that has less cushion. If you have a lot of foot pain, you want a shoe that's higher cushion. So cushion, drop, stability, or neutral, 3 things that I look in a shoe when I'm giving a prescription. Now, I will say, if you say, what's a good shoe that covers 40% of the population, which means it's only accurate 40% of the time, which isn't great still, I'd say Brooks Ghost.
That's what I would say.
Brooks Ghost is a workhorse shoe. They're on like version, I don't know, like 19 or 20, or Nike Pegasus, where they're on version 37.
Yeah.
They're both neutral shoes. The Brooks Ghost is 12 millimeter, yet mid cushion. The Nike Pegasus is 9 millimeter mid cushion. They've been around for a long time. They're terrible shoes for me, but 40%, Brooks is 40% market share right now in the running world. So there's some success there. Nike's actually 5th in market share, which is kind of crazy. So it's like right now, I think it's Brooks, New Balance, Hoka,
I don't know, beyond the top 3.
Mizuno, Nike. Like it's like Nike's pretty low, but the Pegasus, they don't put any effort into it. It's all basketball shoes, maybe some track, I guess, but basketball, football, everything like that. So Nike has like a good shoe, a couple good shoes, really, really fast shoes, setting world records, and Nike Pegasus, and that's all they have compared to Brooks. So branding, Brooks does a good job for sure,
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I just got my wife Brooks Ghost for Christmas, so I think I did all right.
Perfect. Nailed it. Good go.
Awesome. I'm going to check the chat one more time. I'll cover the entire screen with my hand as well.
Yeah, sure. If anyone has any other questions, they can put something in the chat, or they can let me know in the chat, and I can unmute them as well.
Yeah. And if anything, we will give you our email when we send the document.
Yeah. And
then you can message us too. That totally works for us. So we'll give you both our emails. And I'll be honest with you, if there's a question that comes across that I'm not just going to make up things. Like it was like an injury question, I can't tell you. But if you have like a running question, like, hey, what did you mean about this? Send it over. No big deal. I'm glad to answer it, and I'll send you a response back. So we'll put we'll drop our emails in the document that we send to Andy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, cool. I know I had a few extra questions, but you guys answered them throughout. So I think you did an awesome job.
All right, cool. Perfect. Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
It was, we'll see you next week. No, I'm just kidding. But we appreciate it. Thanks, Andy. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate your guys' time, and hopefully we can do something in the future as well.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Cool.
All right,
hey,
thank you both.
Guys. We appreciate it. Good night. Bye-bye.